Welcome to Instant Deck Techs. The aim of this series is to give you a short, concise guide on how to build a certain deck. It won't cover every card, but we'll go through all the categories and go over the types of cards needed to make the deck work. Any card mentioned will be down in the description below. The commander of this deck is Extus, Oriq Overlord. It is 1 white, black for a 2/4 legendary creature human warlock. It has double strike and magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, return target non-legendary creature from your graveyard to your hand. It can also be cast on its backside as Awaken the Blood avatar, which is 6 black-red for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. This spell costs 2 generic mana less to cast for each creature sacrificed this way. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. Create a 3/6 black and red avatar creature token with haste, and whenever this creature attacks, it deals 3 damage to each opponent. This is going to be built around an aristocrat style shell, but using more instants and sorceries than a traditional build. The front side wants us to have both instants and sorceries to trigger magecraft, and then non-creatures to actually bring back. The backside of the card will really help late game, as it will serve as a great sacrifice outlet hanging out in the command zone. They can also make a token that can drain out the table. In an aristocrat build, the deck generally wants recursion, token makers, sack outlets, and a way to drain out our opponents. This commander really does do it all, so we'll be playing cards to complement everything that it's trying to do. Let's start with the token makers. We'll use these to create a mini but very wide board state. My favourites in this category are young Pyromancer, Sedgemoor Witch, and Monastery Mentor. These will make us a ton of tokens over the course of the game. To trigger those previous cards, we can run some token makers on instants and sorceries. I like cards like these over things like Dragon Fodder and Raise the Alarm, as they have a much higher upside to them and can really make us a lot of tokens, especially the X spells. To keep the curve down, we can also run some token makers on some really cheap creatures. What's nice about these is that with our commander out, if we can trigger its magecraft ability, we can then return one of these cheap creatures to our hand and then replay it on the same turn. And then at the other end of the curve is things like these. You won't need anywhere near as much of these, but they are very impactful. And then there are also token makers on enchantments and planeswalkers that you can also consider in the deck. You do lose some synergy with the commander, but the fact they survive a board wipe and are harder to remove makes them worth considering. The planeswalkers especially get additional bonuses, with Tevesh Sat providing some card draw and Elspeth providing a board wipe, so they can always count in those sections as well. We all know the point of those lovely tokens is to die. When they do, with cards like these out, we'll drain out our opponents until they're withered husks of a magic player. Cards that say each opponent will generally be better in the deck, and while I'm trying to avoid legendaries that we can't get back with our commander, I do think, as Sir Conrad triggers when we nab a creature out of the graveyard, it's worth including. In total, we're looking for between 6 and 8 of these effects. These are to an extent our win conditions, so it's not worth scrimping on them. To do the dirty work on our tokens, we want to run some sack outlets to make this nice and easy for us. When looking for these, free sack outlets are always better than ones we have to pay mana for, so we can leave our mana up to do other things. Because we have one of these effects on our commander, we can get away with only running between 4 and 6 of these effects in the deck. For our card draw, in total we're looking for around 8 bits. The first 4 I would look to either be on creatures or planeswalkers that make creatures. There really are some cool interactions with some of these in the deck. I really like Street Wraith, for example, as with our commander out we can get it back again and again, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery. And Smothering Abomination and Liliana Dreadhorde General serve as perfectly good sack outlets in a push. Because we do want to be triggering our commander's magecraft ability, I would have the other 4 bits of card draw on instants and sorceries, just for that added bit of synergy. And then in a deck like this, with all those lovely 1/1s running around, Skullclamp will be as broken as always. Our ramp will be in a similar position, however larger portions of these cards will be on rocks. We just need to have that ability to ramp out turn after turn, so at a minimum you need 6 rocks, but being sensible probably means that 8 is required. For the more explosive turns, you can run some ramp on instants and sorceries. I'd probably look to Culling the Weak and Jeska's Will over straight Dark Ritual, as they do other things other than just providing mana, but being able to trigger Magecraft may still warrant its place, especially if you think you're short on instants and sorceries. When it comes to our interaction, we're looking to run at least 8 bits in the deck, but maybe more depending on your playgroup. Mardu really shouldn't have any issues getting rid of things, and it has some of the best bits of interaction out there. Run the most efficient and cheap bits that you have available. Another way of taking it, however, is by looking at creatures with adventure. Their effects may be a bit more narrow, apart from Murderous Rider, but we can send one on an adventure to trigger Magecraft on our commander, then we can cast the creature later, and then when it dies, it's a Magecraft trigger away from coming back to our hand, meaning we can cast it all over again. Then moving on to our board wipes, I'd look for ones that can leave us with a board state afterwards, or in the case of Fumigate, gain us some life from everything that dies, so it's not so much of a feel bad. Moving on to some recursion, although our commander does a good job of getting things back from the bin, having some redundancy won't be a bad thing, so I'd look to something like Order of Midnight and maybe a Fun Titan. Moving over to some win conditions, first up is Ruinous Ultimatum. While this may look like a board wipe, this card is utterly backbreaking if we have any kind of a board state. Also, as the mana requirement is quite difficult, playing it late game should mean that we'll win the game nice and quickly. And then, in a deck like this, I would also look at running Vicious Shadows. We've recommended this card a few times on similar decks, but it really is that good. If you've never played with it, I would highly recommend sleeving it up and giving it a go. You will thank me, but your playgroup won't. For some combo potential, you can look at running Luminous Broodmoth and Murderous Redcap. If these are combined with a free sack outlet, you can infinitely sling damage at your opponents. How it works is that you sack Murderous Redcap, and then have it come back to the battlefield with Persist, so it comes back with a -1/-1 counter on it. You then sack it again, but this time have it come back with the flying counter on it. When you alternate the type of counters, it means it can come back infinitely. Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, you can't go wrong with lands that allow us to sack some of our creatures, with things like Westvale Abbey, Phyrexian Tower, and High Market. And then after that, you can follow them up with some lands that actually make tokens themselves, with things like Kirkkeep and Field of the Dead. The rest of your mana base will be very dependent on what you have available to you. We've recently released a video with some advice on building a deck with a budget mana base, which might be of help. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments if there are any commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on. Thank you very much for watching.